Good afternoon. First, thanks, Tom, for that very, very wonderful introduction, and also thank you, Leanne, for inviting me to join. It's a great pleasure to be here today, particularly because Alberta actually holds a very special place in my heart. First, I grew up as a neighbor in the South in the great state of Montana, so I'm much more comfortable in my boots and my hiking shoes. And I also had the opportunity to first visit this very area in 1983, when I got to be the tag-along with my brother's Boy Scout troop when they hosted the World Jamboree. That might have inspired a little bit of the world travel, I think. Now, that said, it's better to be at this lodge here than in the torrential rain in a tent where we were. The other reason that during my career with Senator Max Baucus, I served in a number of capacities, particularly focused on trade and agriculture, and we had several innovative pilot projects between Montana and Alberta. I also led a number of the trade missions overseas, so I understand very well what you're trying to do to drive growth and opportunity for your manufacturers, your producers here in Alberta. And finally, with my tenure with the Organization of Women at International Trade, I've had the pleasure to visit Calgary and Edmonton and meet with the amazing women entrepreneurs in this province. I'm very impressed. So all that to say, to be here today, talk about innovative approaches to strategic economic development, especially here in the West, is something I hold very near and dear. So this summit is very timely, as regions around the world are looking to transform themselves into prosperous, sustainable communities in a complex, ever-changing, competitive global environment. Here in Alberta, you are most fortunate to be gifted with abundant natural resources, as well as an environment that is attractive to investors, both from a fiscal and a lifestyle perspective. Additionally, I've been ever impressed how you've embraced global trade, from Asia to Europe and with a growing presence in Latin America. Essentially, you have all the ingredients for success. So how do you unlock the power of your community? Well, in the US in recent years, the National Governors Association has been very focused on 6 trends in economic development. Let me share those with you. First is focusing on the relationship between the state and its regions in fostering economic development. The second is emphasizing job creation from within the state. The third is support for advanced manufacturing. The fourth, creating partnerships to meet industry demand for talent. We're going to talk more about that. Raising expectations for universities to bridge the gap between research and industrialization. And finally, stepping up business export initiatives. Do some of these trends sound like they might be applicable here? Yeah. I see lots of nodding heads. So let's talk about how they might be applicable. And in this, I want to actually say a little bit of a personal story involving my own community. So as mentioned in the introduction, I was with Walmart for 13 years. 10 years ago, I was asked to move to Bentonville, Arkansas, to lead international government affairs. Yes, the epicenter of the world in Arkansas. Now, this required us to move from Washington, D.C. to a little tiny community, approximately 27,000 people. Now, schools were decent, cost of living was great. This is a state that's famous for barbecue, cotton, catfish, former President Clinton. And as luck would have it, it was also the epicenter of 3 entrepreneurs, Sam Walton, J.B. Hunt, Don Tyson. Any of those names sound familiar? Yeah, they grew these little businesses, right from there. To give a little more context, the metropolitan area consisted of Bentonville, and it was bordered by Rogers to the east, Bella Vista to the north, Centerton to the west, Springdale, and Fayetteville to the south. So basically boxed in an area that comprised just under about 250,000 people. That said, it was still a small town. Even so small, we lacked a Starbucks. Yes, indeed. So, folks like myself, we saw it as a 2-year opportunity. We'd move to the headquarters, get the great company experience, and then we'd return to the largest cities, the communities where we had better access to culture, medical facilities, schools, and more. Now flash forward 10 years later, we're still there, and so are nearly 500,000 people. The area has seen a growth of 33.5% in the last decade, and it's not slowing down. Now let me tell you why that's happening. The reason is just very simple and remarkable. The developers had an absolute clear vision for economic development and a laser-like focus on executing a well-coordinated regional plan. So here's what happened. In the past decade, the many small communities that I mentioned banded together to brand the area, basically a 30-mile area, 2-county, as Northwest Arkansas. They then created a plan on the following areas. Access. They took a 2-lane highway, most famously known for Harley riders of the Hog Trail and winding through the Ozarks. Lovely ride, by the way, but not efficient. And they made it a world-class interstate that connected north to south from every community. It also made it a logistics thoroughfare. They also doubled the size of the airport to facilitate the influx of suppliers and others calling on the area to grow. Double the size, it's now Northwest Arkansas. So if you're looking to travel there, look for X and A. They started establishing routes directly to the bigger cities, San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, New York, Washington, and more. Accessibility. Long famous in this area, again, for the Ozarks. Craft fairs, very famous. Access to other retail options, not so great. You'd have to drive 2 hours to Tulsa to be able to shop. They invested in an entire infrastructure to attract retail, diverse retail. Everything from Whole Foods to the most interesting boutiques, small business fostered. They also focus not only on the innovation around malls and infrastructure, but they've also been revitalizing downtown infrastructures in each of the small communities. Lodging. When I first moved there were 2 places to stay. One was the Bentonville Inn, the other you probably wouldn't want to stay at. Today, it hosts the largest embassy suites in the country, double the size with convention capacity that's extreme. New hotels are coming to the region as quickly as they can establish them. They've made it a convention mecca as well. They even have one called 21C, which is one of 4 artistic hotels in the area. You can see movie stars popping in there all the time. It's quite entertaining. Education. We are moving there. One thing that really held back a lot of families was the focus on schools. With Arkansas rated about 50th in the nation for education, that was a big concern for investment. So they doubled down in education. They've been building 1 school a year over the past several years. They'll build a 2nd high school this year. The freshman class has 1,400 kids from 400 years ago. I have twin freshman boys, so we are well aware of the opportunities for education, and it continues to grow. The same growth has happened in terms of the community college, the University of Arkansas, and expanded course offerings. Healthcare. Since coming to the community, an entire medical corridor has been provided and developed that provides everything from the best in pediatrics to world-class oncology. No longer do you need to travel to a Mayo Clinic in other states or to Dallas. And then the last is a focus on culture. This is very, very interesting. Northwest Arkansas now hosts what's called Crystal Bridges, and it is the largest collection of American art in the country, in much part due to Alice Walton, who invested in not only this extraordinary facility, but has made it open to the public and free for life for any visitors. That now attracts about 200,000 visitors to the community each year. They've also just recently opened up a children's museum, a music and arts amphitheater, and are on the fringes of opening a performing arts theater in the region as well. And finally, they've been investing in the outdoors, even more so than ever before. Parks have been developed, recreational facilities, a minor baseball league has developed, which is fantastic, and a biking trail that connects, and this is quite remarkable, the 30-mile area from the tip of Missouri down to Fayetteville. Now you can ride your bike. This took all of the communities working together to make it happen in less than 3 years. So what was the magic? It was all about leveraging assets and having a very clear plan to execute against. First, the community, how they did it. As a region, they were very, very specific in identifying new industries for growth, expanding beyond the traditional agriculture and manufacturing base, the cotton, the rice, the steel, to retail-related industries, logistics, packaging, focusing on suppliers, and then setting a transformational goal of becoming an internationally recognized center for the arts. Now, 10 years ago, even I would have been skeptical that was going to happen. But now it's recognized by the New Yorker as one of the top destinations. And we have a direct flight to New York, believe it or not, for art critics. But next they focused on talent, and this really was the magic. The talent they wanted to attract and retain. Suppliers, merchants, lawyers, doctors, accountants, logistic providers, marketing agencies, art docents, curators, restaurateurs, and recruiters, which was interesting. Many of the services that would have been procured in larger cities and by larger firms and talent pools outside the area. And then they focused on the who. Who do they want to bring to the community? And here they focused on young families, as well as digitally savvy technicians and diverse talent, and then provided what they needed to get the quality and services they would expect in a large metropolitan area. Finally, they looked at leveraging all of the resources in the area: the government agencies, the corporate sponsors, educational institutions, NGOs, and local citizens. So for example, all of the chambers of commerce came together and the mayors to build a joint area-wide programming and plan. They don't compete, they complement. They launched a partnership with the federal government, the state of Arkansas, and the University of Arkansas to fund a World Trade Center. So yes, Bentonville is on the map with a World Trade Center. Who knew? Local companies have equally partnered in investing in infrastructure. There's partnering with the University of Arkansas to launch a school focused on supply chain management and international business management. Yet another chose to focus on global business ethics. And students from around the world come to Arkansas to learn about some of the best practices in agriculture. Now these may be similar assets that you have too. And finally, business started partnering with NGOs to help companies understand about sustainability initiatives. Now sustainability can often be daunting, but in this case, how do you reduce energy, reduce packaging, renewables? So partnering and having those NGO partners in the area to work directly with suppliers and the vendors and the logistics company have really helped unlock the opportunities. And finally, there's just an incredible level of volunteerism. In fact, in one day alone, I remember about 2,000 volunteers put up 5,000 trees in 3 hours. So things really happen when the community gets behind, and many of the corporations incent their employees to have volunteer hours. So they match with funds, they may match with hours and more. So it's a very vibrant community. So I used to call it maybe area in steroids, but now it's really recognized as the fastest growing region in the South. So Northwest Arkansas, and I share that with you, is really a product of innovative partners interested in the unstoppable belief of if you build it, they will come. And even more remarkable is the result. They'll stay. I'm proof. So these innovative partnerships are starting to happen around the country and in many, many markets around the world. I know just to the south, Governor Bullock in Montana has initiated a Main Street Montana project led by 2 prominent private sector leaders who developed and are implementing a state business plan through public-private partnerships. The plan has 5 pillars. Train and educate tomorrow's workforce, really quite the theme here. Create a climate that attracts and retains and grows businesses. Build on the state's economic foundation. Market Montana, and nurture emerging industries and encourage innovation. Now, the reason I thought this plan was interesting, not just because there was a plan that brought together a public-private partnership, but there's also a component that involves Canada, and Alberta more specifically. That's being led by the Montana World Trade Center. So I think you're going to start seeing more of these regional partnerships come together. And who knows, maybe this will very well transform the Montana-Alberta relationship and completely tip the US-Canada access on its border. It'd be a great thing to see. Other states such as Colorado are leveraging their region to attract the millennials. The techies from San Francisco love the lifestyle of the Rockies. So again, a big focus on talent development. What is going to bring those new communities to drive it forward? It's an oil and a gas economy, but you also see microbreweries growing like crazy, right? So it makes it work. So during this conference, you're going to explore many ways about creating partnerships. And as you do, I would like you to keep 2 things in mind. Is your community developing talent? And is it a magnet for talent and top talent? And second, are you leveraging, prioritizing, and deploying resources in a manner that ensures the best return on investment as a region? Okay, keep those in mind. I'd also ask you to consider another question. I'm going to ask for a show of hands on this. How many of you think or are working on projects where local initiatives are driving cross-border trade? How many of you are working on projects where local initiatives are growing cross-border trade? Show your hands. How many think that this could unlock opportunities in your community? All right, we're getting more hands here. How many would like to know how it can? All right. Well, the next I'm going to segue a bit into this as well, is while you're developing your communities and more, and certainly something that we saw in Northwest Arkansas, you would ask, why did someone move all the way to Bentonville to live on an airplane, basically around the world? I also worked with many, many of our suppliers. And so as they came to Walmart, basically 2,000 co-located in the region. They also supported the global markets, so 27 countries. We were moving product between every one of our retail markets, some more complex than others. And I've had a great experience to land product in countries and work with regulatory regimes around the world. So with that though, understanding the complexities and how both leveraging your local projects can accelerate your business, there's some very interesting things that I've seen that also drive sustainable positive changes. So 2 things I'm going to ask you as we talk about this next section. We talk a little bit about trade, especially because Alberta does rely on robust trade. 1, are you best leveraging global trade and regulatory regimes to deliver tangible and transformational results? And here we're really talking about not just the pitch, but landing the product and driving the bottom line. Is it going to reduce costs or is it increase sales? 2nd, are you positioning all of your economic development resources to attract new industries while simultaneously re-energizing traditional industries who stand to benefit from the new trade agreements? Now, I spent literally 13 years asking these very questions and helping suppliers unlock the potential of trade. And this allowed me to have a front row seat in the development of many industry trends that are clearly here to stay. And I'm going to share 3 of those today because they're related to trade. The first is doing business, doing it right. The second is solving difficult problems together. And the third is going global through new trade regimes. On the doing business, doing it right, trade is certainly a big boost to any economy. However, at the end of the day, customers not only look at the best price when they're getting a product, tariff reductions, investment incentives are all good, and they are only part, though, of the competitive advantage successful companies have. There is also an increasing focus on making sure that the right thing is happening in the supply chain, for the people in the supply chain, in the places where you operate, and for the good of the planet, the people, places, and the planet. This not only matters to consumers, it also matters to a company's reputation, and just as importantly, the bottom line. In many cases, I've dealt with partnerships that started due to a crisis that ended up costing millions of dollars and impacting reputations. However, I am a firm believer that through upfront investment in transformation can not only provide a competitive advantage, but also can increase profitability. We are now increasingly seeing greater regulatory requirements focused on the supply chain. So as you're looking to export your products, it's important to be watching what's happening in terms of trends, for example, related to the California anti-human trafficking requirements that require reporting. This is something that's actually starting to happen in the European Union, most recently in the UK, and Canada is starting to look at these provisions. These are reporting requirements. Other measures are being developed as a part of companies taking on policies, whether that's animal welfare or requirements for ingredients. Now, in many cases, Canada already is world-class in these areas, so this could be very much a competitive advantage for you. Other initiatives involve sustainability, reduction of waste, energy, packaging, and more. And what a company is doing to accelerate change and sustainability could be a competitive advantage. Also, supplier diversity. I had the pleasure of working with the launch of the Women's Economic Empowerment Plan when I was in Walmart, which involved a commitment to source $20 billion from women-owned businesses around the world. Just pause on that, $20 billion. Huge opportunity if you can find the right suppliers, grow their business, and grow the opportunity. Now, of course, the last piece is supply chain integrity is critical, and knowing how to do business in the right way with the right partner will have your lasting relationship. So these are being developed at all levels. These sort of requirements are happening at the government level, they're happening at the local level, they're happening at As much as the WTO discussions are happening, they're happening at the OEC, and they're happening in company boardrooms, where there is a plethora of new requirements for doing business in the global marketplace. Seems a little daunting, doesn't it? Right? But in all reality, what you're starting to see are trends toward partnerships that are helping identify the ways to unlock the opportunity, because it's focused on the customer need. And in these areas, particularly with safety and treating workers right, it's not a competitive edge. This is something that companies are doing together. So we've been hearing a lot more in our industry about it's better to be predisposed for action than to be a victim of circumstances. But this is certainly the case, that we're seeing more innovative multi-stakeholder approaches to capacity building and risk management. And these public partnerships are leveraging each other's strengths to influence regulatory regimes and also align in standards. Sometimes it's faster to align on regulatory regimes. I'm going to share with you an extreme example. And this is the case of Bangladesh. In the last couple of years, of course, many of you will recall the tragic collapse of Rana Plaza and the fires in Tazreen. This was a wake-up call for anyone doing business in Southeast Asia, certainly given the fact that the complexities of acting in that market, where there was a lack of rules, oversight, auditors, and more, made it a very challenging industry. But for the first time ever, the brands, the stakeholders, put aside their political differences and decided to be laser-like focused on doing one very strategic thing, and that's setting up fire and building safety standards and developing an entire plan against it. It really was a remarkable effort. For the first time, all the brands had established a common set of fire safety standards for audits. Everyone uses it, whether you're European, Canadian, American. Amazing. The industry then worked with the government to ensure that every factory was inspected. They put the assessment results online, transparent for the first time ever, that you could read this. NGOs became involved. Equipment manufacturers were brought into the country to help look at the state-of-the-art building equipment, and then, more importantly, make sure it was installed properly and maintained properly. We worked with NGOs to train workers around the world, those who knew how to do training programs to train 1 million women to get out of buildings and factories safely. Others worked on building managerial skills, empowering with voice. And then they continued to establish a lot of work through the ILO and other government stakeholders. And in this case, the Canadians, the Brits, the Americans, the Dutch have all worked together to put their economic resources and development resources in the same focus. It was one of the most complex situations I've ever seen, and they're still in turnaround. There's several years in this commitment, but in just 3 short years, buildings have been inspected, remediation is underway, workers are trained, and there is a clear alignment on what needs to be done moving forward. Why did this work? Because people put politics aside, competitiveness aside, and they worked to drive change in a very focused manner. And now they're looking to replicate these public-private partnerships around the world. On the other hand, I've had the great pleasure of working on the Women's Economic Empowerment programs that I talked about. Now, we set that $20 billion commitment for women-owned businesses. The challenge then was, where do we find them? How do we make sure that they have the opportunity to come to us? What industries are women in? Is it manufacturing? Is it services? How do we know if they're certified? One of the great groups we ended up working with is an organization called We Connect International, actually from Canada here. Helped us train women around the world, give them information related to financial literacy, but more access to financing, working with logistics providers and more. And we've been able to unlock women businesses now in all countries around the world, including some like Japan and Chile, where women's organizations simply didn't exist before then. So we had to partner with all sorts of stakeholders to achieve a goal that was set. But this was here, and I would stress this with you as well, there are companies setting these goals. These are customers who are being very specific about what specs they want and what type of partners they want. Cracking that net and looking at who you have in your communities that may be eligible could be a huge opportunity for some who may not have considered looking at cross-border trade. So with that trade, Canadians are certainly not strangers to trade. You've long been engaged in exporting and importing manufactured goods and agriculture products to economies around the world. And in the next few years, trade ties will expand under the recently completed negotiations with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the TPP, as well as your deepening trade relationship between Canada and the European Union. Now, TPP is interesting. It's perhaps the largest regional agreement ever accomplished between developed and developing economies. It includes countries of Canada and the United States, as well as Japan, Malaysia, Australia, Vietnam, as well as Chile, Peru, and Mexico and Latin America. Most people forget we've got the Latin side as well. But it's really interesting because it's an agreement that unlocks vast, vast opportunities for new industries, particularly those in the service sector. And for the first time ever, it opens doors in e-commerce and cross-border digital trade. So let me pause on this for a moment. As you're looking at your traditional economies and your growing economies, digital trade is a huge opportunity for growth. Under the new trade agreements, we can envision educational institutions deepening distance learning programs overseas, and doctors providing online diagnostics. Small business owners who want to grow through e-commerce will see less complicated customs requirements with reduced duties that will make shipping cross-border not only fast, but affordable. Traditional sectors will also benefit. Agricultural producers will see new markets such as Japan open to Canadian exports, and new reverse season opportunities with countries in the Southern Hemisphere grow in markets such as Chile. Manufacturers who currently hesitate to export equipment to countries, to Mexico, such as requirements to have a local presence, it means having actual office in the country, will no longer have to face this hurdle under the agreement. So there's many things that are starting to arise in TPP. It's a long agreement. I know it's complicated. You don't have to read all 1,000 pages on it, but I would actually encourage you to go look at the pieces where your service and e-commerce sectors and your new economies may benefit. Because Alberta is well poised to take advantage in this new area of trade, especially with the fact that you have offices in several of the key markets: Japan, Mexico, Singapore, and Vietnam. So I urge you, take a look at it and start getting ready to unlock the opportunities now. So in conclusion, it's such an honor to be here today, and an honor to have the opportunity to share with you some of the insight and opportunities I've had the pleasure of working with over the years. But the reality is, we need to thank each of you. You are the ones who are making it happen in your community. You're the ones who are unlocking the magic. I'm really looking for the next couple of days as we explore more innovative partnerships, and I'm looking forward to what amazing businesses you will build and how you'll be growing your attractive, sustainable, and amazing communities. Thank you, and look forward to a few questions.